Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Mike Mathu KE and this is my programming series. So today we're going to be looking at classes and objects. I'm sure you've heard about something called object-oriented programming. So most of it is based on classes. Classes are basically a way that you can cluster functions and variables to create what I usually call a user-defined data type. Okay, and this is one way that you can have your objects. So objects are basically instances of a class. So for example, if we say like a fruit is a class, then an object will be a banana or a mango and so on and so forth, right? So that's some way that we can classify things. So today we're going to be looking at an example of a class where we're going to use a person as a class, and then we're going to create at least one object so that you can test with it, and then we're also going to put a function within that class so that we can see how the classes are supposed to work. Okay, so I'll just dive right into the code so that we can see how these classes are defined and how they work. We'll start off with C++. So here in C++, whenever you're defining a class, you start with the keyword class that basically says I'm starting to define a class, and then you give it a name. So in this case, we'll give it the name person. Okay, and then now we'll put this curly braces and a semicolon. Please note that you must have these curly braces. So again, this curly braces in C++ basically means we are defining a scope, and then we have this semicolon at the end. Now next, we now start defining our variables. So what can describe a person? For this case, we're just going to use age. We can use weight as well, and then we can use let's say the name, of course, the name, so that it can define who this person is. So first of all, there's a keyword called public, and there's another keyword called private. Basically, by definition, public just means whatever we're going to declare here will be a public variable. That means it will be accessible from outside the class. And then a private variable, of course, it means it's only accessible within the class. So we'll start with this public here, and then we're going to put the semicolon, the colons, of which under this colons now is where we'll define our variables. Now, when it comes to this, by default, a class in C++ is private. Okay, so that's why we need to declare this public. Usually, it's also good practice that you can define the private ones even whenever you're defining the private variables, that you still use the private keyword. That is just for the sake of readability of you as the programmer or anyone else who is coming to read your code. So when we come here, we'll have the name. So I'll introduce something new called a string. So in C++, we have this string variable. So it's a complex variable. It also uses a class on the background. This is why I had not introduced it beforehand. So this std string is what you're going to be using now, and then we'll call it name. So std string name. So that's just a declaration. So a person will have a name. Let's say we'll have a weight and the age. So now let's say people usually don't give their weight or their age. So let's declare this as private. Okay, so you'll have int age as private and int weight as another private variable. So once you declare this private, anything that you declare under it will come into the private category. And once you declare this public, anything that comes under it will be declared as public. Okay. So now we've completed our class. We've given it attributes of this person. So now we can now create an object. So in creating an object is kind of the same way that we do it when we are declaring variables. So we do it with person. So we call person. So now this is our data type. That's why I call it, it's kind of a user-defined data type. So we have this person defined here, and then now we can give this person let's say person 1, we can just use P1, and that's it. We've declared our person. So what if we want to, let's say, give this person a name, right? So we can do it with P1.name is equals to, let's say, Michael, for example. So that's one way you can give this person this attribute a value. Okay, so when you declare it here, when you declare it like this, you see we do not have default values for these variables that we've declared here. That means that by default there's no value assigned to these variables. It's just a person without a name, without an age, without a weight. We've just declared a random person. But now here we have p1.name equals Michael. So now we've given a value to the name. So what happens when you try to access our age? We see that even in the suggestions it is not available, and if we try to give, let's say that, you can see that we're getting an error. It's definitely saying that we cannot assign to a private variable. So what happens in this case? How do we give this person a value yet we have a private variable that we cannot access outside the class? So here is where we use functions. Now functions within classes usually are given a different name. We call them methods. So when you come here, I can declare public again and define my functions here. So you can still declare your function under this public. It's okay. However, in this case, I am doing it with I just like to separate the functions from the variables so that we have just a distinction. Okay, so here we can have a function. So it's a function that won't return anything, so it's a void. And then we can call it set age, and then we can pass an integer where we can call this let's say age again. So now here off the bat we have an issue here. We've declared this private integer age, and we have this age again, which we are trying to pass through the variables. Of course, here we're going to say age equals age, but then which age is which age? You cannot get the variable by default. You cannot look at it and guess which value it's referring to. Why? Because this function is part of this class, which means this age is accessible within this function. So usually what happens, different conventions are used. What I like to use is whenever a variable belongs to a class, I give it an m underscore. M for this is for the specific class. Okay, so m underscore age, like so, and m underscore weight. So basically saying this is a member variable. Okay, so even for the name we can still give it m underscore name. It's still okay. So here when I try to modify, I can give it m underscore name as well. So this we're going to of course we're going to modify this accordingly later. So when we come here to m underscore age, we give it the value of age. And so here what we do, we say p1.set age, and then we give it our age now, which we gave it as 22. And so now we have given this person an age. Next, we can give this person a weight. Okay, so for here we can just note weight is in for us we use kilograms in our country, so I'll just use weight in kg. So that's just a side note for any developer who is coming in. It's usually good to give, especially for variables that are very dynamic. So in this case, we have weight which we can give in pounds, we have weight we can give in kilograms. So it's best to usually define what weight you're referring to. Okay, so p1.set weight, and then we'll give it, let's say, 60 kilograms, for example. So now, of course, here we've not declared this function. That's why it's complaining to us that we've not declared anything like this. So again, we still need to come here and define our set weight, give it a variable that has the weight, and then weight is equals to weight. Okay, so it's very obvious what's going on there. So usually these functions are what we call getters. It's a general term for defining the functions that we use to get the value of a variable. So these kind of functions are what we call setters. Basically, it means they are used to set a value. Okay, so here we are setting the value of age, of the mh to age. Okay, so that's what it means when we call it a setter. And then now we can also have getters. So getters are basically functions that are used to get variables. So in this case, for example, if you wanted to query what is the age of this person, you see we cannot use this convention. This is the convention for accessing a variable. However, since these are private, then we'll need to have a getter so that you can get the value of that of these variables. So here we can have void get age. So in this case, it won't be void since we'll be returning the value of the age. So we'll call it int get age. This time we do not need to pass any variable, and then we can return the actual age that we have. Okay, so that's one way you can do it. So I'll just repeat this for our get weight function, which is another getter that we'll have, where we'll return the weight. So what happens here? So if we want to print the values of this person, so you'll just come here stdcout and then p1.mname std endline. I hope you remember when we went through this. Then we can have the get age, okay, which is our getter, and then we can have the get weight, which is another getter. So if we run this, so we'll definitely see that we'll print out exactly the properties of our person here. So this is our object, p1 is our object, and these are the variables that we are assigning to it. Here we are assigning these variables Michael as the name, we're setting the age, and they're setting the weight. And then now at the end of it, we are printing the values that we've just assigned to that object. So that's a general overview of how classes work. So let me go to Python so that we can see also how the classes work in Python. So when it comes to Python, classes work basically the same way. So when we start, we have our class, we define our class, and then we give it the name, of course, which we'll call it person. And then for starting our scope, you remember in Python, we do it with a colon. So when we start like this, now we can define our age. So let's say age, which is an integer, and then we have weight, which is also an integer, and then we have our name, which is a string. Okay, sorry, string is written in shorthand here, so str, that's what we need. Okay, so now in Python, things change a little bit. In Python, the everything that we define there is public by default. There's no private methods or private variables within a class in Python. So when it comes to now calling our object, so what we do is we say p1, so this is a type of person, and then we now call this person, and then we put in brackets. This is basically what we call a constructor function. It's something that's also in C++. We've not looked at it yet. We'll look at it more in depth when we do it in another series. This will be divided into a bit more different parts. So this here is just a constructor saying that this p1 value we've assigned it to the person class. So now we have an object of the type person. And then from here, we can have our name, and then we can give it again, Michael, p1.age, can give it 22, and then p1.weight, we can give it 60 like we had before. And then now when we want to print, everything is still accessible in the same way. So obviously you can see here that when you use dot, we are saying we have this object, but now we want to access whatever is inside the object. Okay, so then we basically use p1.name to access the exact name that is within. Print p1.weight. So you can also see here that I'm not using the m underscore prefix. So this is just what we call a convention, like a convention that you choose so that you can have your code being more readable or make more sense. So in this case, I am not using it. I can still use it here, but I am not using it in this case. So this is just something that you decide as a developer for the sake of making your code easier to read and also easier to follow. So that when you know, every time we have m underscore, we know this is a member variable. It belongs to a certain class. So when we print this, we can see that the result is the same as we had before. So let's say in our class we want to do, let's say for example we want to increment our age. Let's say it's someone's birthday, so we want to increment our age. So how can we do that? We can do it, instead of doing it let's say manually by taking this p1.age and adding 1, we can do it with a function. Okay, so let's try that. So define our function. So let's call it increment age. With our braces. So in Python, you usually have to put this self as the first as our first parameter in a member function. Why? So this self basically refers to the instance of the person. Okay, so for example, if we're let me just put pass here so that I can illustrate. So when we do p1 dot, let's say increment age, when you call this function, this self will be the value of p1. Okay, so that whenever we do anything here, so self, for example, dot age, we are referring, it's the kind of the same as p1 dot age. Okay, and then you'll notice here that we do not pass the p1 here. We do not pass it as a variable itself. By default, it's taken as a parameter. By default, this p1 is taken as a parameter, as the first parameter, in fact, and that's now what we define as self. So we can now say self.age equals self.age plus 1. Okay, so now that increments our age. So when we run this increment age, it will change our age and add it by 1. So we expect that our age here, 22, will become 23. So if I run this, then we'll have Michael, 23, and 60. So you can now see how the member functions work in Python. So in Python, obviously, you'll have to declare a function, and then remember our first parameter will always be self, which refers to the current instance of that class, the current object that we are currently using to call this function. Okay, so that is generally the gist of it. This is just an introduction to classes. I'm doing this in different parts so that we can separate, because classes are kind of a broad topic. They're very broad, and I'll just break it down into different sections so that we can look at it one by one, step by step, so that you can also have time to get it into your mind, what classes are, how they work, and you can get those different concepts one by one. So I really hope you have enjoyed this video. I really hope you've gotten to learn what classes are. We'll be looking more and more into classes in the next video, seeing different things such as inheritance of classes, and many other things that we'll be looking at, so that we can see how classes generally work, and how powerful they can be. So I hope to see you next time. I hope to see you in that video so that you can get to learn. I hope to see you next time.